Me being 100% truthful is dangerous. It's controversial. Right. There's some family weddings that I get invited to, the majority. There are like a minority that I don't get invited to because people think by me being honest, by me being authentic, there's a danger. There's, I'm a bad influence. The only time I kind of felt different, actually, one, when I was at school, growing up and being bullied heavily for being a gay kid. And then the first time going on to like the gay scene and being othered for being a brown kid and being called the P word and everything.
Do you know where that desire to actually enforce a difference, not just for your own self, but for everyone out there who can relate to you, where that comes from?
I run a monthly queer Bollywood club night. And when I started it, there used to be this guy that used to come really regularly. And then one day he didn't come. And then we did some digging and realized that, he was a victim of honor killing. And I was like, why is this happening? Why are these things still happening? Something needs to be done. Like, we can't have more and more people either committing suicide or being killed for who they are. I think that just opened the door of just constantly being in the public eye and constantly speaking up.
I managed to dig out some pictures.
Okay, wow.
Is this the one?
Yes, that is the one.
I don't know if I can show that to the... Hello everyone, and welcome to the collaboration podcast between Roots2Routes and South Asian Heritage Month. So today I have Asifa Lahore, who's joining the show as a South Asian drag artist who really stands for something that I find isn't as easy as people think it is, which is being your authentic self. This is a word that's thrown around a lot, so I'm going to get her to explore what that really means and what she really stands for. So, Asifa, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to kick off with a quote that you said, just because I'm gay and Muslim doesn't mean I'm not part of that community. Break down what you meant when you said that.
Wow. I mean, that was a massively long time ago. And obviously since then I've transitioned and I live my life as a trans female now. But I think at the time what I meant was that I could be part of both communities. That I could be, I think when I said that, I was in my 20s, I was coming to terms with my identity as a queer, Desi Muslim. And at the time I was being told by both communities, by the gay communities, I was being told, oh, you can be gay, but you can't be Muslim. By the Muslim communities, like you can be Muslim, but you can't be gay. And I was like, actually, no, I am who I am, and I if I belong to both communities, I belong to both communities, and I'm glad I stuck to that.
Something in that is really striking. I've interviewed a few people who've come from a background where their community place a lot of expectations on them, right? Especially when you come from not even just South Asian, but Asian, African. We're inherent in the roots is this sort of expectation that we either place on ourselves or that we inherit from above because of the challenges that they've been through in order to fit into a certain mold.
Yeah.
In your story, I see that there's that cultural expectation that's inherent, but then also there's just a societal norm that you're breaking barriers through.
Yeah.
How did you deal, or did you feel the weight of that pressure? And how did you manage to navigate that, especially in the early years?
Definitely felt pressure. And if I'm totally honest with you, I still feel pressure. I still feel pressure kind of navigating the different identities I belong to. When I sort of like started my journey, both my personal journey and my professional journey, like, God, this was, in the noughties, there was like no map.
Yeah.
Right. When I first started coming out, I couldn't see other brown people like myself. I'd enter spaces that were majority white. And I'm talking about the queer community here. And I found it difficult, like super, super difficult. Like, yes, there's this expectation that I place on myself, in terms of being South Asian, being Desi, being Pakistani and Muslim, and then going into the queer community and trying to kind of reconcile the both. And when you have sort of no map before you, when you have no sort of visibility of other people like yourself, on one hand, it's really freeing. On one hand, it's like, God, I can do whatever I want, and it's cool. And then on the other hand, where do I go? Like, how do I reconcile this? How can I do this on my own? Because I've got such a lack of community. And in those early years, I just felt I had to compartmentalize myself. I just felt like when I was within the queer community, I could be the biggest queer person, campus, brown boy in the room. And then going back to, my parents' home or the mosque or family weddings, like, you just totally shut out your queer side.
Yeah.
So, God, I felt a lot of pressure in the early years. And the more and more I came out, the more and more I talked openly, I think within my family, within the community, and publicly about the different communities that I belong to and that I refuse to sort of pick one over the other, that became better and better and better. But the reality is, I don't think that pressure goes away. I mean, 20 years on, when I just hosted Pride in London, and the main stage at Trafalgar Square, I had so many people, like from both communities, queer communities, South Asian communities, coming up to me wanting to take photos. And I remember distinctively there was this trans young person, brown, desi, British, came up to me and said, "Oh, I met you like last year in Brighton, and you probably don't remember me, but you had a massive impact on me. And I just want to say, like, it's inspiring watching you host this event, but also it's inspiring you being you." And at that time, like, I felt this elation, but at the same time, there was this pressure of being, this role model to this person. So the pressure is always still there. And I think most of it is placed by myself on myself, of trying to be the best person that I can.
Something that I've come to learn about you through reading into a bit of you is I see you as more than just being this advocate for the journey that you've directly been through, i.e., LGBTQ community and trans, and really being an advocate for people being their authentic self, which is something that I've heard you say.
Yeah.
I think authenticity is a word that is very easily thrown around, be authentic, be yourself, and it is the right thing, but it's a very broad statement to throw around. What does that actually mean to you and what you're trying to stand for?
Wow, what a question. Yes, so it's so easy for me to sit here and say, be authentic, be you. And I think you're right, that is thrown around so easily these days. I think for me, being authentic is just living every day in truth, because I personally spent so many years in shame and so many years what I call in darkness. And I know that sounds quite dramatic, but when you go through years of compartmentalizing yourself and lying, you kind of get to a point where you've said so many lies to cover up so many lies before that you forget who you are. You forget what's the truth and what's the lie. And I think authenticity for me is just truthful, just being truthful. And that comes with so many dimensions, because if I take on one of my identities, the South Asian identity, there's a lot of I come from a community where there's so many politics, where, there's so many family politics, there's so many community politics, there's so many religious politics. And if I am to be honest, it opens up so many minefields, within the family, for example, or within the community. Me being 100% truthful is dangerous. It's controversial. It's there's some family weddings that I get invited to, the majority. There are a minority that I don't get invited to, because people think by me being honest, by me being authentic, there's a danger. There's, I'm a bad influence. And that's still the case in 2025. So I think, going back to your question, for me right now, it's, I'm 42, and I've spent my whole life kind of chasing authenticity, and I'm happy. I'm in a happy space, but I do know that by me being truthful, me being 100% authentic, and me letting all my identities hang out and sit side by side, I know for a lot of people that's problematic.
Something that I love about everything that you've even said here, and anyone that knows you, I'm sure will agree with this, is how you stand by the heritage and identity that you've come from, but then you've also realized is who you are. And what I mean by that is, there are cases where, say, if you've gone against the norms of the identity that has been created for you, and I use created because it's ultimately something that's shaped you from before your own time, i.e. the ethnicity or culture that you were brought into. When you align, like you say, with your true self, and then that other inherited version challenges it, it's really easy to push that away, because that is, whether it's through the people or whether it's through the media or something that's written, is making you contradict the true self that you're trying to be. But you don't do that. You actually lean into it and be like you said at the start of this conversation, I can and I am both. And yes, it becomes more of a challenge to bring that out, because there are people always pushing back. And, in 2025, it's still going to be the case going forward. Trying to relate that to what other people can take from it. How do you do that? How do you manage to still hold that identity and not only just tell yourself, but, publicly promote that I can be both, even when you face all that tension and pushback that you're wrong for what you are trying to do?
Do you know, I think it's come from years of self-acceptance. I think it's also come from years of conversations with family, with community, from traveling to Pakistan and back over the years. Like I said, I'm 42, and I started this journey in my teens, and I'm at a happy place now because I feel like I've had those conversations, and yes, those conversations still continue, but they have got better with time. So I'm very lucky in the sense and privileged that because I've had those conversations, I've kind of dragged my family along with me. So I have a certain degree of acceptance. I still live with my mum and dad. I moved back in with my mum and dad a couple of years ago because my father had a stroke. And the culture and the religion I'm part of is very much like, you respect your elders, you respect your mum and dad. And mum and dad have been there for me in very, very dark times when I've challenged them, when the community's challenged them, they've always stood by me. And so, when my parents are in need, I'm there for them. So I think that's a very strong part of my identity is, yes, there's a lot of noise around me, but I've got a very strong family unit. And it's not perfect, and it's not... there's still challenges. I mean, my mum today was asking me, where are you going? Yeah. What are you doing? And that's a natural kind of state you slip into in the South Asian world is my mum still wants me to check in with her. Yeah. She still wants to know about my career, what I'm saying, because obviously it affects her.
Yeah.
I share a great deal of acceptance in Pakistan. I come and go. I have a lot of extended family out there. And I think that's given me a lot of confidence to be myself. If I can be accepted by a large majority of my family in Pakistan, and I can come and go, and I can still be myself both here and there, and my success can be celebrated within the family. And when I mean success, I mean, as I mentioned, hosting Pride in London, my social media and the WhatsApp messages I receive from my family boost me on. And I think for me, that's the most important thing. And the older I get, the more I realize actually it's my family, it's my close friends, it's those people around me that have stuck by me throughout my years that help me reconcile everything together. I think everything else is just noise. I'll always continue to be myself. I'll always continue to speak out. But I think at the core of my being is that strong self of self. And that comes from mum and dad.
Yeah, let's unpack some of those roots, because you mentioned your mum and dad and the key role they have played and do play. What's the origins of the roots? So either starting with their story or even grandparents' story. Yeah, what has their journey been? that has ultimately gives some context of, why they are, how they are with you?
God, yeah. I mean, every British South Asian person, I mean, everyone's story really starts from partition. We've had such generational trauma from the partition of India. So my grandparents both originate from northern India. Uttar Pradesh. My dad's family at the time of partition moved from North India to Lahore. And then from Lahore, my dad came to London. He went back to marry my mum. My mum's family are from Uttar Pradesh, northern India. And at the time of partition, they moved to Karachi in Pakistan. And when my dad went back, he went back to Karachi, met my mum, had an arranged marriage. And my mum came in the 70s. My mum and dad essentially grew up on disco music.
Right.
They love the Bee Gees, they love ABBA. And that's, when I came along in the 80s, my sort of first memories were disco music, were pop music in our flat, our council flat in Brixton. There were times early on where I had very close contacts with Pakistan. So my dad, when he married my mum, he made a promise to his mother-in-law, who's my maternal grandmother, that I will make sure that you see your daughter every year.
Yes.
So every summer, me and my brother and sister were whisked off to Pakistan, and we'd spent the whole summers in Pakistan. So I have very strong connections to Pakistan. And my mom and dad's, I think those journeys that my grandparents had, that my parents had of migration really impacted me because I always felt I had one finger in the UK and one finger in Pakistan. There was a point in the 90s where my mom and dad moved back to Pakistan, and I did spend 3 years in Pakistan as well. So yeah, my parents and Pakistan and my roots, my Desi roots, mean a lot to me.
It reminds me, as you say, all South Asians share a similar kind of backstory in that way. So my background heritage is actually East African Indian. So my grandparents are from India, but my parents are born in East Africa. And they also, as a result of things out of their control, had to move because of what happened in the 70s with the Idi Amin.
Sure.
But when I unpack their story and hearing about their love for Simon and Garfunkel, all of these, it's this idea of being able to still maintain that connection with your own identity and heritage, still eat the same food, still celebrate when it comes to Diwali, etc. But then also embrace elements of your new surroundings and not isolate yourself as if just trying to maintain what you had in your home environment in the new place that you're in, but actually take the elements that you like, which is British pop culture, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think all British Asians do that, right? We take the best of both worlds and make it happen for ourselves. It's interesting, actually. Something came up for me as you were saying that, and what did come up for me was I was allowed to express myself, whether it was, watching Bollywood films, whether it was, watching Top of the Pops or watching EastEnders. I was allowed to do everything. And the only time I kind of felt different, actually, or was made to feel different, was there were 2 times. There was one when I was at school, growing up and being bullied heavily for being a gay kid. And then the first time going on to the gay scene and being othered for being a brown kid and being called the P word and everything. But, that sort of early childhood with my parents, I thought that, I'd hear about racism, but I never experienced it at school. I never experienced it out in London. So I just assumed it happened to other people until it happened to me on the gay scene.
Yeah. You mentioned the arranged marriage, and part of that is obviously that's what they grew up as knowing was a tradition or a way that things are done. It's very classic of the previous generation. Is there an element, do you think, of the fact that your parents went through that, but to kind of give you the choice and the flexibility to do and be who you wanted that they maybe didn't have the chance to do?
That's an interesting question, because I always felt a pressure to marry a Pakistani person. Obviously a Pakistani girl, because I was born male. But then interestingly enough, when I came to understand myself, I think I placed a lot of pressure on myself to marry a brown person, marry, and I say marry specifically because coming from that traditional background and coming from that conservative background, I think sort of marriage, monogamy was kind of instilled in me.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like, I'd go into the gay scene and the total opposite was projected to me. So I think I placed a lot of pressure on myself to, and I say a lot of pressure, but I think growing up with the Bollywood fantasy, I wanted to meet, my Bollywood hero and have that for myself. So I think it came from both sides. I think the pressure came from both my parents. But ultimately that pressure went once I think they realized who I was. And then I think I placed that pressure on myself because I wanted to be the good brown kid. I wanted to be the good son that was in a marriage. And I think I chased after, or kind of like had blinders on where I was just looking for Pakistani boys.
When did you know that wasn't the way that your life needed to unfold?
Do you know, I chased it. I chased it for a while in my 20s. There was a period where I was in a civil partnership with another Pakistani man for a good 6 years.
Yeah.
And then when I came to terms with my gender identity, that union ended and I, began my transition and began living life full time as female. And don't get me wrong, I think that desire, that dream, that hope, everybody wants to be loved, right? And I still, the door is still wide open for that to happen. I think what's happened in the meantime is the journey that I've been on in reconciling all my identities together and transitioning, especially during the times that we are living through, has really taken all my energy. It's taken all my time. I have a very busy career. I perform as Britain's first out Muslim drag queen, and I live my life as fully transgender. So that's taken a lot of my time and energy. And in recent years, my mum and dad's health has taken my energy. So I think in terms of love, that's taken a back seat in my life. But the dream, the hope has never stopped. And I'm not afraid to say I'm into brown men. And I would love to be, I'd love to be somebody's first choice.
I love that. Something that I'd love to understand is, everything that we've covered about what makes your journey so impressive because of how challenging it is, at least objectively, is, going through navigating what you need to navigate for yourself, find your place, but also proving that you can live the identities of, both communities. Why also put yourself in the public space to really be that front-running advocate for what you stand for? Yeah, what is the motive behind that? And do you know where that desire to actually enforce a difference, not just for your own self, but for everyone out there who can relate to you, where that comes from?
It's a good question. I mean, when I first started doing stuff in the public eye, it was very much about visibility, about raising visibility of the queer South Asian community. I can remember the specific point, actually. It was I run a monthly queer Bollywood club night. And when I started it, there used to be this guy that used to come really regularly. And then one day he didn't come. And then we did some digging and realized that, he was a victim of honor killing. And this was what the year of London 2012, the Olympic Games, and I was like, why is this happening? Why are these things still happening? And I kind of at the time just, I was in a space where I was in a civil partnership with a really, the love of who I thought was the love of my life at the time, and I thought, okay, something needs to be done. Like, we can't have more and more people either committing suicide or being killed for who they are. And so I decided to basically be public about who I was as a drag artist and the life I was living. And I think that just opened the door of just constantly being in the public eye and constantly speaking up. And, back when I started in the years of between 2010 to 2015, there was hardly any brown queer person speaking out.
Right.
And then obviously 15 odd years later, now we've got so many out people on social media and in the public eye speaking out about it. And that's great. I'm so glad that I'm not the only one anymore. But in hindsight, the more, I think especially in recent years, in the last couple of years, I've really been thinking about why I do put myself out in the public life. I've got like I said, I've got a pretty privileged life. I could sit back and, be happy and kind of let other people take the baton. And if I'm totally honest with myself, and I've done work around this, I think a large part of it is just, I just want to be loved. I want to be loved. I want to be accepted, for me. And that's on a personal note, is I think I just want to be accepted for me. And a large part of me doing this is me accepting myself and me loving myself, because it's been tough. It's been, for years being on your own doing this, it's been really tough. And I think I just want to acknowledge myself and love myself and be loved as well. And I don't think I'm afraid to say that.
And that reminds me of a quote that you said that really stuck with me when I heard it, which was, for me, it was down to accepting each and every part of me and not feeling like I had to give up one in order to embrace another. And you went through a time when, you've said that you could have taken the easy route to going into drag and, adopting the Shirley Bassey approach and being like that, but that wouldn't have sat right with you. For people listening who can relate to wanting to be their true selves, and finding that also advocating for, whether it's your identity or heritage or family or whatever it may be, is the more challenging route, what would you say to them?
I think everyone has a choice. Everyone has a choice in life. And I had a choice to either go with not giving up, like taking every identity with me at every step, or I could have just chosen one over the other. But for me, I was never allowed that privilege. I also think having a choice is a privilege, because like I said, you mentioned drag. When I first started doing drag, I'd go on stage wearing a simple sweet sequin dress and lip syncing to Shirley Bassey, or, singing a Lady Gaga song. And I was never, the drag community at the time were like, there's nothing original here. There's nothing, you're not doing anything out of the box. Why don't you do something to do with your culture? And it was like, I was never really allowed to not, I had to take everything with me. I had to take all my identities with me. So I never really had that privilege of choice. And had I just done that, maybe I would not have had a career. But to anybody else, all I'll say is, look, everybody has a choice, but there always comes a time where you have to choose. You might choose one identity over another, but I promise you, the identity you don't choose, it will catch you up in time. There'll come a fork in your life where you've got to actually acknowledge that identity and tackle it head on. It's kind of like, like the term I'm triggered by this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're triggered because you haven't dealt with something within yourself, or a trauma, or something that's happened to you in the past. And I kind of feel like this is a parallel to that if you choose one over the other, there's going to come a time when the thing that you haven't chosen, or the identity you haven't chosen, will catch up to you and will trigger you, and you'll have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Life for me isn't faking it. Like, you've got to be real. And I think for me, what works is just at every avenue going, okay, does this feel real to me? Does this feel authentic? Does this feel right?
Yeah. Or are you just blending in for the sake of it?
Exactly. Are you just blending in for the safe road, or for the sake of it, or the easy path? And listen, the easy path might be right for you at that point, but that easy path is going to run out.
I love what you said about the triggered bit, because it's something that I was reflecting on, where, people who make sly comments, like British banter is very much built on friendly insults as a way of connecting with people. But the points at which the insults actually trigger you when it's meant to be a joke is, I was having this conversation with someone, it's the times when some part or some element of what they have said actually reigns true inside you, that like you said, you haven't dealt with, or that you've purposely ignored, or purposely trying to think is not you. Say if you're speaking to someone who is in great shape and they're very proud of their body, and you tell them that they are a slob and sluggish and look terrible, if they don't actually feel anything like that way, they will take it as a joke or a terrible joke. Right?
Yeah.
But as soon as some part of them where they're trying to convince themselves that actually I'm trying to pretend like I'm really happy with the way I look, but deep inside I feel fat, I feel thin, I feel whatever. And then if someone then comes and makes a joke, whether they meant it to be malicious or not, there's some part of you that will be triggered because there's some part of you that actually believes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if someone comes out and does say something to you about the way you're being or the things you're doing, and whether they are trying to hurt you or not, if it does actually hurt you, then it probably means there's some part of it that you haven't accepted that they're right about, and you're not being who you truly want to be. Otherwise you wouldn't take it.
Yeah, totally. And listen, we all have insecurities, and I always feel like we're always constantly growing.
Yeah.
And at any point, whether it's a joke, whether it's a relationship ending, or whether it's I don't know, a parent passing away, something triggers you in your life where you have a turning point, and you just have to deal with whatever identity issues you haven't dealt with. And I think that's part of life. That's a natural part of life.
You were mentioning that you hosted Pride. And I managed to dig out some pictures, which I think was from when you did it in 2024.
Okay, wow.
Which was really impressive, because you also mentioned how throughout your life you've been dealing with being in front of majority white crowds for a lot of the journey that you've been on. And that would have been a similar thing. I think every year it gets progressively more mixed. Yeah. But it's still very predominantly white that you see. Yeah. And you went from wearing a rainbow burqa, which if I can find, to transforming to a sari, and then even a Union Jack, which I think really nicely summarizes the way that you embrace all the identities. So is this the one?
Yes, that is the one.
I don't know if I can show that to the...
God, I love my rainbow burqa. It's like iconic. So when I first started doing drag, I would go on stage with a black niqab and a black burqa, and because I was performing predominantly to gay audiences, they would get scared. Right. They would literally get scared, and I'd be like, okay, how can I make this accessible to a queer audience? And so I literally just ordered some, flags, and literally I got my auntie to make that rainbow burqa for me and that niqab for me. And so I was like, okay, so who am I? I am, British South Asian queer. So, and I'm doing drag. So let's become like the fantastic Punjabi girl that I can think of. And so literally I would start in that rainbow niqab and burqa, take that off, and I'd be wearing a gorgeous sari underneath.
Yeah.
And then halfway through I'd take that off, and literally my blouse would stay on, but underneath I'd be wearing the Union Jack mini skirt. And it's just, I think that's literally, I grew up watching the Spice Girls. I grew up watching Lily Savage, Dame Edna Everage. And literally, those are the influences that kind of have influenced my drag and my being very much. I mean, yes, today I'm here as myself, as the everyday trans woman that I am. But a lot of my wardrobe, a lot of my being is very much the mix and blend of British and South Asian. And that's something I'm very proud of always.
Yeah, you've also said that London, the thing that you love about London is that it allows people to embrace their identities and their complexities and have the opportunity to express everything they want. Do you see this as something that realistically can happen everywhere? Or do you think it will always be a challenge where, yes, London has its flaws, but does allow people to embrace who they want to be? And that's one of the things that draws people to it. How do you see the picture evolving in general?
Do you know what? There's very few cities that I find you can be 100% yourself. And I think London is definitely one of those. The cities I've traveled around the world, there's many that I personally feel that I can't be 100% myself. But London's one of them, New York's one of them, Los Angeles is one of them, Mumbai is one of them, oddly enough, and so is Karachi in Pakistan. These cities, the reason why you can be 100% yourself is because they are so diverse. They're diverse in all their melting pots of creed, of color, of ways of thinking, of class. And I mean, if I take something like London, right? You've got all sorts of people living side by side. And we may agree or may not, agree with each other, but we allow each other to live. And that's important. Same for Karachi. So my mum's side of my family is from Karachi. And in Karachi, it's a southern city in Pakistan, business capital. It's got all the different races and subgroups of Pakistanis. So it's got like Punjabis, Balochis, Pathans, Saraikis, Sindhis, Urdu speakers, Hindus, Sikhs, like you name it. And I think, cities like that just have a melting pot of different experiences, and they just allow people to be themselves. Karachi is another city where I can literally just be myself, or a different authentic version of myself.
Yeah. And I really wanted to take the conversation down this bit because yes, there are a lot of struggles and the struggles are going to continue, but there's a lot that you also try and, I don't want you to say preach, but that you try and send a message about the opportunities where you can shed a positive light on what's happening and the enjoyment and, things like pride. So tell me about Queer Parivar.
Queer Parivar. Wow. So I made my acting debut in a short film called Queer Parivar. It was the Iris Prize winning short film. It was directed by a lovely friend of mine, Shiva Raichandrani. And it was just a queer love story, essentially, about intergenerational South Asian family, both chosen and biological. And I essentially played a younger version of the main character in flashback. The opportunity came about during the pandemic. I never thought that I would, do film or be an actress, but I think that opportunity came about while I was in a very reflective moment during the pandemic, and I decided to take it. And it was the first thing I did, like post pandemic. Like, you know, we shot that like as soon as we could.
What did it mean to you for that opportunity? Not even that opportunity to come along, but the fact that something like that has been produced and exists.
I think it's a great example of South Asian queer media. I just think that having those examples out there, those films, those short films out there, it gives visibility. It gives visibility of South Asian queer people producing their own art for the masses. And actually, it was Queer Parivar that actually allowed me to then produce another film called Unicorns, which is a British film, which is actually out on Netflix now, a love story between a British Indian drag artist and a single dad from Essex.
Love that. And so this is obviously not the end. It's very much the beginning. You know, you still, I think as you've said, you have a flame that you need to make sure burns brightly. So what is next in your story?
What is next in my story? Very good question, because I never know. The way my life works is you just never know what's waiting around the corner. I think my biggest desire right now is love. I'm open to love. I really want to meet somebody, and I think I'm going to focus on my personal life and put myself out there again. I think that's the next chapter for me.
Thank you so much for everything you shared. Is there anything else you want to end with, like a closing remark or something that you really hope the listeners take away either from your story or, you know, the work that they can do to forge whatever it is that the journey that they're on?
You know, there was a time in my life where I wanted to give up and I felt that I couldn't have the life that I wanted, and I felt I had to give it up for the sake of family. And I just want to say to people out there, look, I still stuck to my guns. I still allowed all my identities to hang out with each other. I didn't give up, and I still have my family by my side. So I think just live and try and live as honestly as you can, no matter how scared or how dangerous it may be.